Commander Vorthak stepped through the gleaming corridors of Nexus Station, his massive frame casting long shadows on the polished metal walls. At 9 feet tall with scales that gleamed like dark emeralds, he was an imposing sight even among the diverse collection of alien species that called the station home. Deep scars crisscrossed his hide, each one a story of battles fought and won across 3 centuries of warfare. The diplomatic reception hall buzzed with conversation as delegates from across the galaxy mingled beneath floating lights that cast a warm glow over the gathering. Vorthak's presence changed the atmosphere immediately. Conversations hushed as beings turned to catch glimpses of the legendary warrior, their voices dropping to respectful whispers. "Is that really him?" a small blue-skinned diplomat asked his companion, his 4 eyes wide with awe. "Commander Vorthak himself," came the reply. "I heard he once held off an entire battle fleet with just 2 ships at the Crimson Nebula." The stories began to flow like water from a broken dam. Ambassador Kelrix, a tall creature with silver skin and elongated limbs, found himself surrounded by younger delegates eager to hear tales of the commander's exploits. His voice carried easily across the nearby tables as he spoke. "The Battle of Kepler Station was perhaps his finest hour," Kelrix began, his tone filled with admiration. "The enemy had breached the outer defenses. Thousands of civilians were trapped inside with no hope of escape. The station commander was ready to surrender when Vorthak arrived with his personal guard. The small crowd pressed closer, hanging on every word. Even seasoned military officers from various species found themselves drawn into the tale. Single-handedly, he carved through enemy lines that had been holding our forces back for weeks. His blade moved like lightning, cutting down opponents twice his size. When the dust settled, the entire enemy assault force lay dead at his feet. Not one civilian life was lost." Murmurs of appreciation rippled through the listeners. Such stories were common when Vorthak was present, each more incredible than the last, yet all verified by multiple witnesses and official military records. Near the far wall, a much smaller group observed the scene with quiet interest. Captain James Mitchell stood with his 2 junior officers, their simple blue uniforms marking them as representatives of Earth's colonial defense force. Humans were still newcomers to galactic society, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 30 years earlier. Their delegation was small and often overlooked at such gatherings. "Look at them all," Lieutenant Roberts whispered to his captain. "They worship that alien like some kind of god." Mitchell watched the crowd around Vorthak grow larger as more delegates joined to share their own stories of the commander's legendary status. His weathered face showed no emotion, but his experienced eyes missed nothing. As a career military officer, he understood the value of reputation in warfare. Fear of a single warrior could sometimes accomplish more than entire fleets. "The Siege of Titan's Gate," another voice chimed in, this one belonging to a reptilian creature with bright orange scales. Vorthak challenged their champion to single combat rather than waste lives in a prolonged battle. The enemy warrior was legendary in his own right, undefeated in over 200 duels. Vorthak ended the fight in less than 5 minutes. "What about the Centauri incident?" someone else added. 6 of their best fighters came at him together, claiming he had dishonored their clan. He fought them all simultaneously and walked away without a scratch. The tales continued to flow, each more impressive than the last. Vorthak himself seemed to enjoy the attention, occasionally nodding or adding small details to particularly exciting moments. His deep voice rumbled like distant thunder when he spoke, commanding immediate attention from everyone within hearing distance. Mitchell noticed how even the most battle-hardened veterans in the room spoke of Vorthak with a mixture of respect and barely concealed fear. Generals who had conquered entire star systems, admirals who commanded vast fleets, all showed deference to this single warrior. It was an impressive display of reputation built through centuries of consistent victory. "Captain," Lieutenant Roberts said quietly, "do you think the stories are true? I mean, some of them sound almost impossible." Before Mitchell could answer, another tale began, this one told by a grizzled warrior from the hegemony worlds. His species was known for their brutal honesty in military matters, making his words carry extra weight. "I was there during the Vorthak's campaign against the Shadow Pirates," the warrior began, his scarred features serious. "We had been hunting those raiders for years with no success. They knew our space better than we did, hit supply convoys and vanished like smoke. Vorthak studied their patterns for exactly 1 week, then took a single ship into their home asteroid field." The crowd leaned in closer, even those who had heard the story before eager to experience it again. He returned 3 days later with the heads of their 3 top commanders and coordinates to their hidden bases. Single-handedly broke a pirate network that had terrorized shipping lanes for decades. When we reached the asteroids, we found over 50 dead pirates and not one scratch on Vortak's ship. Mitchell found himself genuinely impressed despite his natural skepticism. Such consistent success across multiple theaters of war suggested either incredible skill or equally incredible luck. Given the detailed nature of the stories and their multiple sources, skill seemed more likely. The reception continued around them, but the focus remained on the towering commander and his legendary exploits. For most attendees, this was likely the closest they would ever come to such a famous figure. Vortak represented the pinnacle of what a warrior could achieve, a living legend whose very presence could change the outcome of conflicts. As the evening progressed, Mitchell couldn't shake the feeling that he was witnessing something significant. In a galaxy filled with advanced technology and massive fleets, the fact that a single individual could command such universal respect spoke to something deeper about the nature of warfare and reputation. The legend stood among them, very much alive and seemingly invincible. Vortak's keen golden eyes swept across the reception hall, cataloging the various species present with the practiced assessment of a seasoned warrior. His gaze lingered on the small human delegation standing near the observation windows, their simple blue uniforms a stark contrast to the elaborate dress of other diplomatic parties. Curiosity stirred within him as he observed these newcomers to galactic society. The legendary commander made his way through the crowd, other delegates stepping aside respectfully as he passed. His massive frame moved with surprising grace, each step calculated and purposeful. The humans noticed his approach but held their ground, which impressed him slightly. Most species showed some sign of nervousness when he drew near. "So you are the humans I have been hearing whispers about," Vortak said as he reached their small group. His voice carried easily over the ambient noise of the reception. "Your species is quite small compared to most who travel the stars." Captain Mitchell looked up at the towering alien warrior without flinching. At 6 feet tall, he was considered average height for a human, but next to Vortak he seemed almost childlike in comparison. Still, his posture remained straight and his gaze steady. "Size is not everything, Commander," Mitchell replied calmly. "We have learned to make the best of what we have." Vortak's scaled features showed what might have been amusement. "Indeed. I have studied some records of your species' history. Your ancient warriors showed remarkable creativity in battle despite physical limitations. The battles of Marathon and Thermopylae were particularly interesting tactical studies. The fact that this legendary alien warrior had taken time to research human military history surprised Mitchell and his officers. Lieutenant Roberts exchanged a quick glance with Lieutenant Anderson, both clearly impressed by the commander's knowledge. "You know our ancient battles?" Mitchell asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "A warrior must study all forms of combat," Vortak explained, his tone becoming more conversational. "Your species compensated for physical disadvantages through superior strategy and remarkable determination. The concept of fighting against overwhelming odds appears frequently in your military records." Other delegates began to drift closer, drawn by the unusual sight of the legendary commander engaging in casual conversation with the human delegation. Such interactions were rare enough to generate interest throughout the reception hall. "Tell me about your modern conflicts," Vortak continued, settling into what appeared to be genuine academic interest. "What battles has humanity fought among the stars? Your species achieved space travel recently, but surely you have encountered hostile forces." Mitchell's expression grew more serious at the question. The early years of human space expansion had not been peaceful ones. Pirates, territorial disputes, and first contact incidents had claimed many lives as humanity found its place in the galactic community. "We have had our share of conflicts," Mitchell said quietly. "The Outer Rim territories were particularly dangerous in the early days. Lost many good people establishing our colonies out there." Vortak nodded approvingly. "Every species pays such prices when expanding into new territories. Which of your battles would you consider most significant?" The question hung in the air as Mitchell considered his response. His weathered face showed the subtle signs of old grief, the kind that came from losing people under his command. Lieutenant Roberts and Lieutenant Anderson both knew what was coming before their captain spoke. "The Kepler 7 incident stands out," Mitchell began, his voice taking on the careful tone of someone recounting painful memories. "Pirates hit a civilian transport convoy in the outer system. We responded with 3 ships, but they had prepared an ambush." Vortak leaned forward slightly, his interest clearly engaged. Combat stories from actual participants always held more value than second-hand accounts. "My closest friend, Lieutenant David Thompson, Was serving as my second officer aboard the flagship, Mitchell continued. David had been with me since the academy. We had served together for over 10 years, been through dozens of missions together. The human captain paused, gathering himself before continuing with the difficult parts of the story. Around them, other delegates had grown quiet, sensing the emotional weight of what they were hearing. The pirates used modified mining charges against our hull. Blew a breach in the civilian compartment where we had taken on refugee families from the attacked convoy. 47 civilians, mostly women and children, were about to be sucked out into space. Vorthak listened intently, his warrior's mind automatically visualizing the tactical situation. Hull breaches during combat were among the most dangerous emergencies any ship could face. David reached the breach first, Mitchell said, his voice growing softer. The emergency bulkheads were damaged and would not seal properly. Someone needed to hold the breach manually while we evacuated the civilians and rerouted power to the backup systems. Lieutenant Roberts shifted uncomfortably beside his captain, having heard this story before but never growing used to its ending. How long did this take? Vorthak asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer would not be pleasant. 8 minutes, Mitchell replied, meeting the alien commander's gaze directly. 8 minutes in hard vacuum while his pressure suit failed and his body was exposed to space. David held that breach with his bare hands, his body serving as a seal, while we got every single civilian to safety. The reception hall around them had grown notably quieter as nearby delegates strained to hear the human captain's words. Stories of sacrifice and heroism were universal concepts that translated across species barriers. David Thompson died at that breach, Mitchell concluded, his voice carrying deep respect and old grief. Stayed at his post until the very end. Saved 47 innocent lives that day, including 12 children. We recovered his body still holding the damaged bulkhead in place. Vorthak absorbed this information with the analytical mind of a seasoned warrior, filing away details about human tactics and sacrifice. The story revealed much about this species' approach to warfare and their willingness to accept personal loss for the greater good. The legendary commander prepared to respond, unaware that his next words would change everything. Vorthak's booming laugh echoed across the reception hall like thunder, causing conversations throughout the vast space to halt mid-sentence. Heads turned from every corner of the room as the legendary commander's amusement filled the sudden silence. His massive frame shook with what he clearly considered genuine mirth at the human captain's tale. Your friend chose the coward's path, human, Vorthak declared, his voice carrying easily to every corner of the now quiet hall. Any true warrior would have sealed that breach with the bodies of his enemies, not cowered behind damaged metal like a frightened child hiding from a storm. The silence that followed was so complete that the soft hum of the station's life support systems became audible. Alien delegates throughout the reception hall froze in place, their various facial expressions showing shock, confusion, and growing alarm. Even the most battle-hardened warriors present recognized they had just witnessed something unprecedented. Mitchell's face went completely still, all emotion draining from his features until his expression resembled carved stone. His brown eyes, which moments before had held the warmth of shared memories, now turned as cold and hard as winter steel. The transformation was so complete that Lieutenant Roberts involuntarily took a small step backward. A real warrior dies with his weapon in hand, facing his enemies in honest combat, Vorthak continued, completely oblivious to the change in atmosphere around him. His tone remained casual, as if discussing weather patterns rather than dishonoring the dead. Not hiding from battle like some spineless creature afraid of its own shadow. Ambassador Kelrix, standing near the commander's left shoulder, made a subtle gesture toward his throat, trying desperately to signal Vorthak to stop speaking. The silver-skinned diplomat's 4 eyes were wide with horror as he recognized what was happening. Other experienced delegates began quietly moving away from the immediate area, sensing impending violence. Your David Thompson died without honor, Vorthak declared with finality, his scarred features showing something that might have been pity for the human's ignorance of proper warrior conduct. He chose vacuum over facing pirates with courage. Such behavior would bring shame to any respectable warrior's family. The words hung in the air like poison gas, spreading through the reception hall and contaminating everything they touched. Several alien species present had cultural concepts of honor similar to humanity's, and they understood immediately that something terrible had just occurred. A few delegates from warrior cultures actually hissed or growled softly, their own instincts telling them that sacred lines had been crossed. Captain Mitchell stood perfectly motionless for several heartbeats, his breathing so controlled it was barely visible. When he finally spoke, His voice was so quiet that beings throughout the hall strained to hear him, yet somehow every word carried with crystal clarity. "Commander Vorthak," Mitchell said, each syllable delivered with surgical precision. "Under Article 12 of the Galactic Combat Accords, I formally challenge you to single combat for the honor of Lieutenant David Thompson and all those he died protecting." Gasps rippled through the crowd like waves on disturbed water. The Galactic Combat Accords were ancient laws that governed personal disputes between warriors of different species. Article 12 specifically dealt with challenges issued to defend the honor of the dead, and it was considered one of the most sacred aspects of intergalactic law. No one in recorded history had ever challenged the legendary Vorthak to single combat. The commander's reputation was built on 3 centuries of undefeated battles against the galaxy's finest warriors. The very idea seemed suicidal to most observers. Vorthak's golden eyes widened slightly, the first sign of surprise he had shown all evening. For a moment, he seemed genuinely taken aback by the human's bold declaration. Then his features shifted into what could only be described as predatory amusement. "A human wishes to face me in combat?" The commander's tone suggested he found the notion entertaining rather than threatening. "You would risk your life over harsh words about a dead friend?" "I would die before letting his sacrifice be dishonored by ignorant fools," Mitchell replied, his voice gaining strength and carrying clearly to every corner of the reception hall. "David Thompson died a hero's death saving innocent lives. That truth will not be perverted by anyone regardless of their reputation." The human captain stepped forward, bringing himself within arm's reach of the massive alien warrior. The size difference was staggering, yet Mitchell showed no sign of intimidation or doubt. His officers moved to flank him, hands resting on their sidearms, though they knew such weapons would be useless in formal combat. "I accept your challenge, little human," Vorthak rumbled, his amusement deepening as he looked down at his much smaller opponent. "We shall see what passes for honor among your kind when faced with real warfare." Lieutenant Roberts found his voice, though it cracked slightly with tension. "Captain, you don't have to do this." The commander spoke in ignorance, not malice. Mitchell never took his eyes off Vorthak as he responded to his subordinate. "Some things are worth dying for, Lieutenant. David's memory is one of them." Throughout the reception hall, delegates began speaking in urgent whispers, many already composing messages to their governments about the unprecedented challenge. News networks would be buzzing within the hour. The greatest warrior in galactic history would face an unknown human captain in single combat. The cause of the challenge made it even more significant. This was not a dispute over territory, resources, or political advantage. This was a human defending the honor of his fallen friend against someone who had insulted that sacrifice. "The combat will take place tomorrow at midday in the station's main arena," Vorthak announced, his voice booming across the now crowded hall. "I suggest you spend tonight writing letters to your family, human. They will want to know how you died." Mitchell's reply was barely audible but somehow reached every ear in the room. "David deserved better than your insults, Commander. Tomorrow you'll learn why." The die had been cast. The legend would face the newcomer, all because he had dishonored the memory of a human hero named David Thompson. The main arena of Nexus Station had never seen a crowd like this one. Beings from dozens of species packed the curved galleries that rose in tiers around the circular fighting pit, their various forms creating a kaleidoscope of colors and shapes under the bright combat lights. Word of the challenge had spread through the station like wildfire, and now representatives from across the galaxy pressed forward to witness what many expected to be the shortest combat in recorded history. The arena floor itself was a simple circle of reinforced metal, 30 meters across and surrounded by energy barriers designed to contain the most violent conflicts. Combat had been settled this way for thousands of years, and the ancient traditions demanded that nothing interfere with the pure test of warrior against warrior. Vorthak entered first, descending the steps to thunderous applause that echoed off the arena walls. His massive frame seemed even more imposing under the harsh lights, every scar on his scaled hide telling a story of battles won across 3 centuries of warfare. He carried his traditional ceremonial blade, a weapon nearly as famous as its wielder, its dark metal gleaming with an edge that had never known defeat. The crowd's cheering reached a crescendo as the legendary commander raised his weapon in salute to the galleries. Beings from species that had been enemies for millennia found themselves united in their awe of this living legend. Even those who had never seen combat understood they were witnessing history. Captain Mitchell appeared at the opposite entrance, and the contrast was staggering. Where Vorthak commanded attention through sheer physical presence, the human seemed almost invisible by comparison. His standard Colonial Defense Force armor looked plain and functional next to the commander's ceremonial gear. The simple combat knife at his belt appeared toy-like compared to the alien's massive blade. A few scattered voices called out encouragement from the human section of the galleries, but their words were quickly swallowed by the vast space. Most observers watched in respectful silence, already composing the reports they would send home about witnessing the end of humanity's brief venture into galactic politics. "Last chance to withdraw your challenge, little human," Vorthak called across the arena, his voice easily carrying over the crowd noise. "I have no desire to kill you over words spoken in ignorance. Your species is new to our ways." Mitchell walked steadily toward the center of the combat circle, his movements economical and precise. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but somehow reached every corner of the arena through the enhanced acoustics. David Thompson held a hull breach for 8 minutes while 47 civilians escaped to safety, Mitchell said, his words cutting through the ambient noise like a blade through silk. "He died so others could live. That deserves respect, not mockery." The formal beginning of combat was marked by a deep tone that resonated through the arena structure. According to galactic law, the fight would continue until one participant yielded, was incapacitated, or died. There would be no interference from outside forces. Vorthak opened with a sweeping strike designed to end the combat quickly and mercifully. His blade cut through the air with tremendous force, aimed at Mitchell's neck in what should have been a clean, instant kill. The crowd held its collective breath. Mitchell ducked under the strike by mere inches, the alien blade whistling through the space where his head had been a heartbeat before. He rolled to his right, coming up in a defensive crouch as Vorthak's follow-up attack carved through empty air. The legendary warrior's superior reach became immediately apparent as he pressed his assault. His blade seemed to be everywhere at once, forcing the human to give ground constantly as he desperately avoided strikes that would have cut him in half. The crowd watched as Mitchell absorbed glancing blows that cracked his armor and opened shallow cuts along his arms and shoulders. For the first 10 minutes, the outcome seemed inevitable. Vorthak's centuries of experience showed in every movement as he systematically broke down his opponent's defenses. The human's smaller size worked against him as he struggled to get inside the alien's tremendous reach while avoiding the deadly blade that never seemed to stop moving. Blood began to flow from multiple wounds as Mitchell's armor cracked under the relentless assault. The crowd grew quieter, many expecting the human to fall at any moment. Even those who had hoped for an upset began to accept that this would end like every other challenge to the legendary commander. But something began to change as the battle entered its second phase. Where Vorthak had expected quick victory, he found stubborn resistance that refused to break. The human absorbed punishment that should have ended the fight 3 times over, yet continued to move, continued to fight, continued to deny the inevitable. Mitchell's tactics seemed almost suicidal to trained observers. He accepted injuries to land strikes of his own, using his smaller size to slip inside Vorthak's guard at moments when any rational fighter would have retreated. His human endurance, forged in the heavy gravity of Earth, began to show as the alien commander's breathing grew slightly labored. "Why will you not fall?" Vorthak demanded between strikes, genuine puzzlement in his voice. He had faced countless opponents, many larger and stronger than this human, yet none had shown such refusal to accept defeat. Mitchell's response came between gasping breaths as he rolled away from another killing blow. Because David never gave up. Not even when his lungs collapsed and his blood boiled in vacuum. He held that breach until every civilian was safe. The human's words carried across the now silent arena, reaching beings who had never heard of Earth or understood human concepts of sacrifice. Yet something in his tone transcended species barriers, speaking to universal concepts of duty and loyalty that resonated across the galactic community. As the combat entered its 20th minute, longer than any fight Vorthak had experienced in over a century, the legendary warrior began to understand that something fundamental had changed. This was no longer about combat skill or physical advantage. This was about something much more dangerous than either. The 25th minute of combat marked a turning point that no one in the arena could have predicted. Vorthak, the legendary warrior who had never fought a battle lasting more than 10 minutes in over a century, found himself breathing heavily as sweat began to bead on his scaled hide. His massive frame, built for overwhelming force and quick victories, was beginning to feel the strain of prolonged combat. Mitchell moved like a man possessed, his battered armor hanging in pieces and blood flowing freely from dozens of cuts. Yet his brown eyes burned with an intensity that seemed to grow stronger with each passing moment. Where other opponents had weakened under Vorthak's assault, this human appeared to be drawing strength from some inexhaustible source. David held that breach while his pressure suit failed, Mitchell said between ragged breaths, ducking under another swing of the legendary blade. His body was exposed to hard vacuum, but he never let go. Never abandoned his post. The human's voice carried across the silent arena, reaching beings who had never heard such determination in the face of overwhelming odds. Even species with no concept of individual sacrifice found themselves leaning forward, caught up in the drama unfolding before them. Vorthak pressed his attack with renewed fury, his blade work still magnificent despite his growing fatigue. But for the first time in 3 centuries, doubt began to creep into his mind. This should have ended 20 minutes ago. The human should be dead or unconscious, not still fighting with the fury of a cornered predator. What are you? Vorthak demanded as his latest strike was barely deflected by Mitchell's much smaller knife. No warrior should be able to absorb this much damage and continue fighting. Mitchell's reply came as he launched himself forward, accepting a deep cut across his ribs to land a solid blow against the commander's armored chest. I'm someone who remembers his friends. Someone who won't let their sacrifice be forgotten or mocked. The human strike barely dented Vorthak's armor, but the symbolism was not lost on the watching crowd. For the first time in living memory, someone had landed a meaningful blow on the legendary warrior. Gasps echoed through the galleries as beings realized they might be witnessing the impossible. As the combat entered its 30th minute, Vorthak's movements began to slow perceptibly. His legendary endurance, built through centuries of warfare, was finally meeting its match against an opponent who simply refused to acknowledge defeat. The alien commander's breathing had become labored, his strikes losing some of their previous precision. Mitchell sensed the change immediately. His human instincts, honed through years of combat in Earth's various conflicts, told him the tide was beginning to turn. But rather than pressing his advantage with reckless aggression, he maintained his disciplined approach, waiting for the perfect moment. We don't fight for personal glory, Mitchell said as he weaved between Vorthak's increasingly desperate attacks. We don't fight to build legends or earn fame across the galaxy. We fight for each other. For the memory of those we've lost. The words seemed to hit Vorthak harder than any physical blow. For the first time he began to understand that this human was drawing strength from something completely outside his own experience. Where the commander fought for personal honor and individual achievement, Mitchell was fighting for something larger than himself. David Thompson died so that 47 innocent people could live, Mitchell continued, his voice growing stronger as Vorthak's grew weaker. Men, women, and children who went home to their families because one man chose to sacrifice everything for them. You call that cowardice? Vorthak stumbled slightly, his own legendary endurance finally failing him for the first time in 3 centuries. The human's relentless assault, combined with his unshakable determination, had accomplished what entire armies had failed to achieve. The crowd in the galleries watched in stunned silence as their living legend struggled to maintain his footing. Beings who had traveled from across the galaxy to witness another chapter in Vorthak's story found themselves watching something entirely different, the birth of a new legend. With a final desperate combination of moves that violated every principle of safe combat, Mitchell launched himself directly at the alien commander. He accepted what should have been a killing blow to his shoulder, using the momentum to drive his combat knife toward Vorthak's chest with every remaining ounce of his strength. The legendary warrior's blade passed through the space where Mitchell's heart had been a split second earlier, while the human's much smaller weapon found the gap between armor plates that no opponent had ever reached before. Not a killing blow, but enough to send Vorthak crashing to the arena floor as his legs finally gave out beneath him. The silence that followed was absolute. Thousands of beings from dozens of species stared in complete disbelief as the greatest warrior in galactic history lay defeated on the metal floor of the arena. Vorthak's ceremonial blade spun away across the combat circle, its 3-century winning streak finally ended. Mitchell stood swaying over his fallen opponent, blood loss and exhaustion finally catching up with him. But his eyes remained clear and determined as he extended a hand to help the fallen commander back to his feet. Your friend? Vorthak whispered as he accepted the human's assistance, his voice barely audible even in the perfect silence. David Thompson. He died a warrior's death after all. The words carried clearly through the arena's enhanced acoustics, reaching every being in the galleries. For the first time, the legendary commander publicly acknowledged his error, his voice filled with genuine respect for a human he had never met. As the two warriors stood together in the center of the arena, bloodied but both alive, the galaxy learned a lesson it would never forget. Humanity's strength did not come from superior technology, individual prowess, or military might. It came from their unbreakable bonds with one another and their absolute refusal to let their fallen be forgotten or dishonored. The greatest warrior in galactic history had fallen, not to superior skill or strength, but to something far more dangerous, a human who remembered his friends.